Mark Rogers TV, week 2 of our college football predictions, coming off a 24-1, week 1 straight up, and obviously most of those games were complete give-me's, but we did hit on the big games at night. Clemson over Georgia and LSU over TCU. Our one miss was Boise State taking on Washington. Not going to mention our record against the spread. You're going to have to go back and look at the video post. It was not pretty. But at the same time, we warned you, 15 of 25 games last week had point spreads over 3 touchdowns. We don't pick those games very well traditionally. Our percentage is way down in those blowout matchups. And also over the past few years, because of those kind of matchups, in the early weeks of the season, we get off to bad starts. We've been under 500 against the spread the last couple seasons, the first 3 weeks. Then we turn it on and finish at 58-59% against the spread. So let's run them down with the added feature this week of the confidence pick. And if you've watched us over the past few years, you know that our confidence picks have been golden. I'm not going to rest on my record, though, from previous seasons, 46-21, 46-21 against the spread. It's a whole new season, and I've got 4 confidence picks for you this week. So we start with Cincinnati taking on Illinois of the Big Ten. And yes, the Illini coming off an 8-point win last week over an in-state school. They were 2-10 last season. Cincinnati won 10 ball games. Sure, it's a Big Ten team at home, and Cincinnati's not a great football team, still not in the top 25, but the Bearcats ran all over Purdue. Purdue and Illinois, in terms of talent, very comparable. Like Cincinnati to win this game and cover the 8 points at Illinois in a confidence pick. All right, Louisville, Eastern Kentucky. Didn't even do any homework on Eastern Kentucky. We saw Louisville win by, I believe, 42 points against Ohio last week. That tripped me up, and Louisville wins this one, covering the 40 points against Eastern Kentucky. Florida, Miami. Gonna sneak in a big game right off the bat. You might have heard us in our broadcast last night with C.J. Harvey, college football writer for ProFootballCentral.com, break down Miami and Florida. This one in South Beach. Canes with the big offense. Duke Johnson at running back. Stephen Morris at quarterback. Florida has trouble scoring, trouble generating productive offense on the outside. In particular, the passing game is woeful at times. Jeff Driscoll, though, can run it. Florida's got the front 7 on defense. An exceptional, hard-hitting SEC defense. One of the best in the country, we expect again in 2013. So I like Florida to defeat Miami and cover 3 points. That 3 points kind of scares me just a bit because I think this is going to be a very close football game, but Florida wins it on defense and special teams at Miami minus the 3. Okay, Oklahoma State against Texas-San Antonio. Cowboys win it and cover 26, coming off an 18-point win at home. Well, that was actually a neutral site against Mississippi State. Wisconsin, Tennessee Tech, and the Badgers, their schedule's so rugged, so tough, that for the second consecutive week, the Badgers take on a team that's a 45-point underdog. Well, Wisconsin does take on Arizona State a little bit later in the season, and we really look forward to that game in the coming weeks. But for right now, at Madison, we like Wisconsin, of course, to win the football game, but Tennessee Tech will take the 45 points if they can just score a few points in covering the spread against Wisconsin. But again, we hate the spreads over 3 touchdowns. You don't know who's going to be in the ball game in the fourth quarter, don't know how hard anybody on the field is going to be playing, and don't know what the play calling is going to be like, whether a team's going to shut down and be very conservative or go for it and run the other team into the ground. Anyway, gotta pick them. Top 25 games. TCU in Southeast Louisiana. TCU coming off that rough game against LSU, 37-27. And we like Southeastern Louisiana because of TCU's limited offense to cover 42.5 points. Of course, the Horned Frogs win the football game. Clemson, South Carolina State, the Tigers, of course, an early bid for the BCS National Championship game with a huge win over Georgia. And Clemson wins again over South Carolina State before jumping into ACC play next week against North Carolina State. Clemson, though, doesn't cover 52.5 points. When I see 52.5, and I know Oregon won, 66-3 last week, I got to take the 52.5 with South Carolina State. Okay, confidence pick coming up here. Virginia won a huge game at home. Mike London, big win out of conference against BYU, 19-16. Oregon has to travel cross country, takes on an ACC team in Virginia on the road, and we like Oregon regardless. With the 22.5-point spread, we like the Ducks. They can score 3 touchdowns in the blink of an eye. 5 minutes, they can take a 20-17 game and make it a 41-17 game like that. So we like Oregon on the road at Virginia, covering 22.5 points in a confidence play. Ohio State, San Diego State. The Buckeyes came out as a 35-point favorite, only led at 1 point in the third quarter by 10 last week against Buffalo. It could have gotten much closer. A penalty saved the Buckeyes from just a 3-point lead, and of course they marched on to victory from there. Ohio State should play much better at home against San Diego State, a loser last week in its opener against a subdivision team. Ohio State wins and covers 27.5 points against San Diego State. We got Baylor and Buffalo, so it's those Bulls after they gave the Buckeyes all they could handle in Columbus, taking on Baylor. And this could be a trap for me here because of the way Buffalo looked last week. But I like Buffalo to cover the 27.5 points. Baylor does win the football game handily. Northwestern playing a tough non-conference schedule. The rest of the Big Ten should take notice. Last year it was Vanderbilt. It was Syracuse. This year they went to Cal last week. A tough road game at night on the West Coast, traveling cross country. They won it late, 44-30. They've got Syracuse now, and they've got that game at home. We like the Wildcats, a much better football team, but 17 points for Syracuse. They showed us a pretty stout defense in taking on Penn State and only losing that game by about, by 6 points in that football game. So we like Syracuse to hold the scoring down and be able to muster something against Northwestern. So Northwestern wins the orange plus the 17 points. Nebraska looked brutal on defense last week against Wyoming. They did win the football game by 3 points. They take on Southern Miss, a team that went 0-12 last season, but it's much better than that. They'll win 3 or 4 football games this year. Not this time, though. Nebraska, of course, wins at home, but we like Southern Miss plus the 28.5 against the Huskers. Texas A&M and Johnny Manziel for most likely 4 full quarters unless it's really out of hand against Sam Houston State. Like Johnny Manziel to tear it up against Sam Houston State and warm it up for the Crimson Tide the following week. The Aggies win and cover 38.5 points. LSU UAB, the Tigers a huge 35-point favorite against the Blazers. Of course, LSU, the much superior football team, got off to a great start in defeating TCU in Game 1. We like LSU to look impressive, but we love the 35 points that the Blazers get here against the LSU Tigers. Okay, Texas-BYU, one of the better matchups of Week 2 at Provo, with the Cougars coming off a tough loss at Virginia, 19-16. Texas blasted New Mexico State. We like the Longhorns to win, but we think this is going to be a close football game. BYU with a very stout defense last year. They brought a lot of guys back, and after giving up just 19 points in the opener, we believe BYU can hold this football game in check and keep it close. We like BYU plus the 7 against Texas. Longhorns win the football game. All right, Oklahoma, big winner against Louisiana Monroe in Week 1 with a shutout, taking on West Virginia minus Geno Smith. We'll see what Dana Holgerson's team has in an early season Big 12 matchup with Oklahoma taking on West Virginia. They had a shootout last season. West Virginia, the big 21-point underdog in Norman. We like Oklahoma to win it, but in a confidence pick, we think West Virginia is good enough to keep it close within the 21 points. USC-Washington State with Kessler and Whittick vying for the starting job at USC. Lane Kiffin has said that this would be audition game number 2 for the USC quarterbacks and taking on Washington State. First Pac-12 game for both teams. Washington State was fairly impressive in going to the Plains and taking it on an SEC foe in Auburn last week and keeping that game close, losing by just 7. USC gave up some meaningless points against Hawaii late to make that a 30-13 game. We like USC over Washington State, but Cougars keep it close and stay within the 16 points there. Our final confidence pick comes out west with Stanford taking on San Jose State, and maybe I'm falling into the trap here. Stanford, one of the best teams in the country. I projected Stanford to play in the BCS National Championship game after defeating Oregon and winning the Pac-12. San Jose State. We love the program, especially since we were visited by head coach Ron Carragher about a month ago, and expect him to be on in future weeks. They are a 25.5-point underdog against Stanford. That game obviously very close for both teams, but it's at Palo Alto. So San Jose State played the Cardinal extremely tough, within 3 points last season. We don't know that Stanford's going to keep it that close this year. Spartans do lose this one. Stanford wins it going away, but 25.5 points is a little much for us. We like David Fales and company to keep it close, put some points on the board, even against a fine Stanford defense. We know that Fales should be in the game late, even with a big deficit against the Stanford team when they may be pulling some guys off the field. So again, Stanford wins, San Jose State plus the 25.5 points. Two huge games on Saturday, South Carolina, Georgia, and Michigan-Notre Dame. First of all, South Carolina, Georgia certainly intrigues us. A couple things we don't like about Georgia. Obviously, they lost 10 starters on defense. They've got one game under their belt. They will probably not face a better offense than they faced last week against Clemson, and at times they were shredded, but that was to be expected. South Carolina's got a much better defense than Georgia. South Carolina shredded the Georgia offense last year, led by, of course, Chaz Sutton and Jadeveon Clowney last year to the tune of just 109 passing yards for Aaron Murray, 11 of 31, one pick as he got buried 35-7. The Georgia offensive line was out-muscled and just really ambushed in that game by the South Carolina defense. The Gamecock defense looks to be top 5 to top 10 again this season. They looked really stout for the most part against North Carolina. Gave up some passing yards, but everything was in front of them and under control. South Carolina is a 3.5-point underdog on the Plains against Georgia. I like the South Carolina defense. I think it's much better in the matchup against the Georgia offense than the Georgia defense against the South Carolina offense. The Gamecock offense isn't anything special, but they certainly have Connor Shaw and Dylan Thompson. That's another factor, possibly. Quarterback gets dinged up. Certainly Shaw and Thompson are comparable, and Shaw is very much a dual-threat quarterback. So if Murray gets trapped in the pocket and really has the huge pass rush against him like he did last year in facing the Gamecocks, he's dead in the water. On the other hand, South Carolina's got mobility at quarterback with Connor Shaw. He really opens up the running lanes, and it could be difficult for Georgia to defend the run-pass option or dual-threat quarterback situation there. Like South Carolina to win it outright, so we will obviously take the 3.5 points as well at Georgia. And finally, Michigan-Notre Dame. Wolverines at home lost this game 13-6 last year, and this game has been razor close in recent times, usually going down to the final play, the final drive, and there's been some thrillers in recent years. Devin Gardner, we really like the new Michigan pro-style offense with Gardner at quarterback in place of Denard Robinson and Fitz Toussaint in the backfield, along with Derek Green, the emerging running back, is a freshman who got some carries last week and ripped off about 58 yards against Central Michigan. Notre Dame brings back a tremendous defense despite a couple losses. Lewis Nix III up front. Stephon Tuitt is one of the best in the biz. Prince Shembo and company, along with Bennett Jackson in the secondary. Notre Dame very good on defense, limited on offense with Tommy Rees at quarterback. I think the Michigan defense is going to be able to pin him in, make Notre Dame somewhat one-dimensional. Michigan wins this football game, but it's going to be very, very close. I don't love this line, so I'm going to stay away from it in regards to a confidence pick because +4, I will take Notre Dame. So I don't have much margin for error. This is pretty much of a hedge play here. Take Michigan to win the football game, Notre Dame plus the 4 points at Ann Arbor. Those are our picks for a week 2 of college football. Would certainly love to hear your favorite picks for this week right here on Mark Rogers TV.